What incorrect things were you taught in school? That there are 52 states in the USA. This was a mistake in a textbook, so this was taught to a whole generation of Austrians, probably also Germans. I was taught that the Moops invaded Spain during the Middle Ages. In first grade I had a teacher that taught us magic squiggle. If you didn't know how to spell a word, you'd just squiggle your pencil in a line roughly the length of the word you were trying to spell. Giant horse would be horse. But if you didn't know how to spell horse, then it would just be today I rode her, and it was correct if you said that the lines were magic squiggle. Nearly every single piece of work handed in was 80% magic squiggles. I don't know how long that teacher lasted before they were fired. Poor guy. Spends all that time getting his medical degree and ends up teaching first grade. In a community college geography class, a student asked why the north of Ireland was part of the UK. The professor replied, because Ireland gave it to the British. Coming from a very patriotic Irish family, this was a shock to say the least. Jimmy Carr while performing stand-up comedy in Dublin. Now, I don't know much about Irish politics, but I think we should have one Ireland, united. The crowd erupts in cheers and applause. Common under British rule. When I was a kid I spent a month or so in Pakistan. During this time, my parents put me in what they call an English medium school. In English class we were reading out loud when I got stopped for pronouncing tiny incorrectly. The teacher was adamant that it should be pronounced as teeny. After about 5 minutes of arguing, I got slapped in the wrist with a metal ruler. Worst part is that the rest of the class probably believed the teacher. Frick that teacher. TLDR. Teacher insisted tiny be pronounced as teeny. I asked my 5th grade teacher, when I see the clouds move in the sky, is it the wind blowing them or am I seeing the earth turning? She told me that I was imagining things and that there was no way that I could see clouds move. Even at age 10 or 11 I knew she was wrong. This is rather bizarre. Also I'm Canadian, not German, but I had a teacher insist that Garmisch-Partenkirchen, in reality a small town in Germany, was an independent country. I think it's because I was putting together a list of countries in Europe, or maybe just of micronations, and he insisted I include it, despite the fact that no atlas had it listed. His evidence, as I recall, was they stamped my passport when I went there. By that logic I have irrefutable proof that Manchester is a country. Pretty sure it's always stamped by the city the airport in. Not sure how else a country with multiple international airports would keep track. I had a teacher tell us that sharks are mammals because they give birth to live young. I was shot down for speaking up. Should have asked about the platypus. I had a science teacher tell us that microwaves cooked from the inside out. His proof was when you heated up a jelly donut the jelly would get hot before the rest of it. Guess he never ate Hot Pockets. Not really school, but in kindergarten, I was taught that the left hand is the hand of the devil and I had to write with my right hand. I am left-handed. Fricked up my calligraphy. My grandpa was left-handed his whole life because there was a girl in his class that was left-handed. He taught himself to be left-handed so she wouldn't be alone. That we only use 10% of our brain. I think we only use 10% of our hearts. Not really something I was taught wrong, but in my recent S class, the teacher tried to give me minus points for writing flora and fauna on a test, claiming that flora and fauna are the same and the answers would be flora and animals. Flora and the Animals kind of went downhill after their second album. I started school at the end of the Cold War. We were taught that Alan Shepard was the first man in space. It wasn't until high school that I'd even heard of Yuri Gagarin. The whole rebel and Yankee thing was a huge dividing thing when I was growing up. I was taught in 5th grade that the South had won the Civil War. The teacher never mentioned that the North won anything. Instead, he focused on the battles the South had won, and I clearly remember him singling out my friend who was from Maryland. So the North didn't win. The South defeated them in their tracks. I still remember his condescending tone toward him. The teacher was a huge redneck and insanely strict as well. Ninth grade English teacher defined the term socialist as a person who wants to change society. I'll never forget because my Republican mom won't let me haha. Also some kid in first grade or something told me the black lines at the bottom of a pool smelled like peanut butter. I wasn't bright. The lines in the pool thing is hilarious. Pretty much all science. It's not totally wrong, and is easier to learn the incorrect simple version followed by the complicated hard version. I find it very frustrating how much of school turns out to have been just overly simplified concepts which don't help if you take a job in the field. Well, in theory, if you take a perfectly spherical school and don't account for friction. That bulls attack red things because they can only see light in the ultraviolet spectrum. I was all what is this, I don't even. No damn it, they can't see color, they're just attracted to the wavy thing over there. In 4th grade my teacher told us that having a six-pack wasn't healthy since your one abdominal muscle was being cut into portions. I've been fat ever since. One of my friends in 5th grade tried to tell me that for girls, a six-pack was a second set of boobs. What? I had a French teacher who insisted that English was a Romance language, and that it began as a combination of Latin and French. We argued about it pretty much every day. Relating to crappy language teachers, I was taught bring brang brung. Crappy, not crapping, although both seem applicable. Most of the stuff we learned in health class about how alcohol affects your decision making was way exaggerated. Also, we wore drunk goggles which were basically kaleidoscopes. WTF. I remember being taught the taste map of the tongue, that we have only 5 senses, and that deoxygenated blood is blue. Yet, I had a teacher tell me that we lick ice cream with the tips of our tongues because that's where we taste sweetness. I always hated the fact that in elementary school and junior high, we're taught that the atom is a nucleus with electrons orbiting it, in the same way planets orbit the sun. Then in high school, teachers go forget what you learned about that. It's actually an electron cloud of probability and you have these orbitals that can hybridize, and I'm like, what the heck is this sorcery? I once had a professor who said education is a series of progressively more intricate lies that gradually approach the truth. I was taught that the first European settlers coming to America came here to start a society where everyone could worship freely. In reality, they came here to start a society where they could worship freely. That's not just semantics, it's an important distinction. Actually, most early settlers came to the US because they couldn't own land in Europe as non-nobles. No title equals no land. If they supplied the trading company who paid for the trip, they would be free and own their own land within a few years. My chemistry teacher tried to teach the class that we can never understand how cooking works. Cooking is a miracle of God, not a chemical reaction. I spent a lot of lunches arguing with her. I consider it a minor miracle when my cooking actually turns out as I intended. High school, grade 10 English, Alanis Morissette. Ironic was used as an example of all the different ways you could express irony. It's ironic that a song entitled Ironic is not ironic. Schizophrenia and the dissociative identity disorder, aka the multiple personality disorder, are the same thing. I even got told to shut up when I tried to correct my teacher. Oh, and that religion is the opium of the people was a quote by Adolf Hitler who, after I also tried to correct that one, adapted it from Marx. We were taught in DARE that if you did any kind of drugs, anything from smoking pot to shooting H, you would lose all your taste buds, and everything would taste like bland oatmeal. That kings of France, and really, all kings, were all awful tyrants. Some of them were, but some others were pretty decent guys who just happened to inherit a kingdom, and try their best to run it, generally while banging a huge number of women. My 3rd grade teacher insisted the vowels were A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y, and sometimes W. When I told her W wasn't, she was like, what's the vowel in Y? My grade 5 teacher told our class that even if your husband beats you with a bat, you get back up and save the marriage. Divorce is a sin, and even as a battered wife you have to keep your family together. I went to a Catholic school and that was the last year I was in it until my mom came to her senses and took me out. Oh, and my teacher was 26 years old at the time and she was engaged. Yep. My parents joined the group of people at our local church who taught the marriage preparation course. A 1-year mandatory course required to get married in the church. One day they taught that you should try to save your marriage unless your spouse is abusive. Then you get the frick out of there and press charges. They were never invited back. That the ability to write in cursive would be the most important part of my education. I recall spending hours with those stupid penmanship workbooks. I was actually told that if I had bad handwriting I'd never get into college. I don't think I've used cursive in a decade. Anyone else taught to put 2 spaces after the end of a sentence? I did that until I was about 26 and I tried to call one my buddies on not doing it. Dang. I had a teacher once tell me that sand was a liquid because you could pour it. I argued with her saying that if you had a big enough container you could pour bowling balls. She kicked me out of class. My world history teacher, who was originally hired to be the volleyball coach, authoritatively told us the locations of the Garden of Eden and the ruins of Noah's Ark, southern Mesopotamia and eastern Turkey respectively. We had to mark the locations on the map portion of our exam. In 7th grade science, a thermometer was described as a hotness and coldness tester. Expletive. Didn't want to hear me when I explained that the root word thermo implied heat, and that a thermometer was used for measuring heat alone. Coldness is just the absence of heat. That Andrew Jackson amended the Constitution writing racism into law. Then I got kicked out of class for pointing out how stupid that sounded in college. This is more of a how I got wronged by a stupid teacher story. 5th grade science test and the question was of the true or false variety. It read the earth was formed over 1 million years ago. I put true. It was marked wrong and when I asked the teacher why it was wrong she said because the earth was formed over 1 billion years ago. Last time I checked a million. She was also the advanced math teacher. I was taught that glass was a slow-flowing liquid. Evidence for this was that in centuries-old churches the stained glass was thicker at the bottom than it was at the top, meaning it was slowly flowing down. Found out later that it made that way so it will be more stable, and that glass was in a sense more solid than lead. I never forgave me teacher. My chemistry teacher told us this. Then the next lesson he told us that he'd looked it up and was actually wrong. I remember teacher telling our class that Mercury was the hottest planet in our solar system because it was the closest to the sun. Of course 8-year-old me couldn't be smarter than the teacher, reprimanding me and making a point of it each time space was brought up in class. I was saying Venus was hotter as the greenhouse effect prevent the heat from leaving, keeping Venus as a molten surface plane, and woo, sulfuric acid clouds. Something like that from what I remember anyway. She wasn't pleased when a few weeks later I brought it a book and showed this to her. Ha, teach you for suspending me when I wasn't even at school, you fricktard. This is really bad. Why do we as a society put up with people like this teaching children? It's because of these sorts of teachers that intelligent kids lose interest in learning. Math teachers tried to tell me that I wouldn't be able to walk around with a calculator in my pocket for my entire life. And English teachers tried to tell me that cursive would be useful and necessary for college. There is no such thing as negative numbers. My 2nd grade math teacher attempted to prove this to my classmate by saying I have 3 pencils. Try to take away 5. He took the 3 pencils, asked for a rain check for 2, and got sent to the principal's office. My 5th grade teacher taught us that if it weren't for the dust in the air, we wouldn't be able to see anything. See, light travels in a straight line. It needs the dust in the air to diffuse it, otherwise it would bounce off everything at completely right angles and never reach our eyes. Astronauts in space couldn't see anything. I was taught that Brontosaurus, spoiler, was a dinosaur. I still believe it, damn it. This is like when I found out Santa wasn't real, only worse, you bastard. The biggest incorrect thing I was ever taught was, they won't take that crap in college. Yes, they will take that crap in college. And homework in college doesn't count for an obscene amount of your grade. If you can pass the midterm final project, whatever it might be called, then you're good, as long as you can prove that you've learned something. That and the whole before Columbus everyone thought the world was flat. Western exceptionalism much? My 7th grade English teacher once spent nearly an hour trying to convince the class that panda bears were not actually bears. Not sure where she got this idea, but she ended up threatening and eventually suspending 2 kids that weren't convinced. The next day, we all told our science teacher and soon after, got a new English teacher. She does pee now. I'm serious. My teacher insisted that thunder was an example of onomatopoeia, words that sound like the thing they describe, such as boo or fap. Now whenever lightning strikes I mockingly mumble thunder. Yes, I should move on with my life. Oh goodness, I have many, but 2 of my favorites are Betsy Ross sewed the American flag. No, she didn't. That was a rumor started some years later by her grandson. The pyramids of Egypt were built by Jewish slaves. No, they weren't. They were built by highly skilled, paid workers who had access to excellent healthcare, food, water, shelter, and excess limestone to build their family tombs. There's actually very little evidence the Jews were ever enslaved in Egypt. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.